Chapter 20. Knights of the Round Table. In the Cubs' meeting room at the church, parents had gathered to witness a knighting ceremony of the entire pack. The room had been gaily decorated with colorful banners made by the boys of Den 2. Chairs had been arranged in perfect circles to represent the round table. Earlier in the evening, Den 1 already had offered its ceremonial performances. Now it was time for Den 2 to show what it could do. From the anteroom, where the Cubs were scrambling into their suits of armor, a buzz of conversation issued forth. "Hurry up, fellas," Dan urged the others. "We're 3 minutes past starting time now. Everyone's all set." "I can't get this flashlight to work," complained Red, as the torch-bearer he was assigned to hold a long pole with a flashlight attached to an end. "You've been playing with it too much," Brad told him. "Luckily, I brought some extra batteries. Here, put this in, and we'll be ready to start." "I'm going to forget my lines," Babe mumbled, repeating them over and over again. "You'll do fine," Brad encouraged him. "All ready, fellas. Dan, you're to do the knighting honors, so get in there." A triumphant, slightly off-key blare of a triumphant salute. Pulling his armor into place, Dan marched into the ceremonial hall to take his position in front of the torchbearer. Addressing the onlooking parents, he said clearly, "Among us tonight, there are a few who have not yet joined the Knights of the Round Table. Although these newcomers have no armor of steel, they are equipped with armor of goodwill, squareness, and honor. So we are gathered here to welcome them into our circle. Bring the first man forward." Brad, holding a torch high, led Jack Phillips from the sidelines. At a signal, the boy knelt on his knee in front of Dan, who said, "As a knight of the Cub Scout organization, you must promise always to do your part. You must follow our leader, obey his orders, and give goodwill." "I promise always to do my best," slowly repeated Jack, who had been coached in his lines. With his wooden sword, Dan tapped the boy lightly on the shoulder. "I dub thee a Knight of the Round Table," he said. "As a knight and a member of Den 2, you are expected to help with all our crusades. Arise!" As Jack scrambled up, everyone cheered and clapped. The ceremony, however, was not over. "We welcome you, Sir Jack," Dan continued. "Don your armor." A suit fashioned from cardboard, burlap, and roofing discs had been prepared for the boy. Babe and Midge helped him get into his costume. Then, as Jack reappeared all decked out as a knight, the other boys formed a double column facing each other. Swords were raised above their heads to form a long archway. Jack walked through to take his place at the end of the line. Next, Babe, who was only a bobcat, received the Order of the Wolf. Other promotions and achievement awards were given out. As a climax to the knighting ceremony, Dan was promoted from wolf to bear rank. The boy had worked hard to win the honor, learning rules of safety, making many handicraft articles, and learning how to tie difficult knots. His most appreciated task, however, had been in making a 50-page Den scrapbook. In the book, the boy had included press notices of Den meetings and activities. 10 of the pages were devoted to snapshots of Cubs and to published accounts concerning the missing money box and its recovery. "This scrapbook will be one of the Den's most treasured possessions," Mr. Hatfield assured him at conclusion of the knighting ceremony. "It will serve always as a nice reminder of our little adventure." Before the evening was over, the Cubs were to have another very pleasant surprise. Soon the Cub Master made the announcement from which everyone had been waiting. Den 2 had won first prize in the knighting ceremony, with Brad and Dan being awarded individual honors for having the most original suits of armor. After congratulations were over, Dan thought to ask Mr. Hatfield if he had heard what was to become of the tramp, Carl Blackmore. "He was in jail, the last I heard," the Cub leader replied. "I was told, though, that Mr. Merrimack offered to go bail him out. He has investigated and found that the fellow had told the truth about being his nephew. Queer that he didn't know him by sight. He had never seen him, not even as a boy, Mr. Hatfield explained. It was quite humiliating for Mr. Merrimack to find out about Carl. However, he's making the best of a bad situation, and I understand wants to help him if he can. The den mother and the other helpers had prepared a fine supper for all cubs. Dan and Mr. Hatfield were starting towards the table when at the same moment they saw a newcomer enter the church meeting room. "Why, it's Mr. Merrimack himself," Dan declared. The elderly man never before had entered a cub meeting, and in fact derived little enjoyment from social affairs. Now his gaze wandered from cub to cub until he had picked out Dan and Brad from the group. Made aware that he seemed to be looking for them, they went over to speak to him. "Well, boys," he said heartily, "I believe I made you a little promise several days ago, and according to the code of the Cubs, a promise always must be kept. Right?" "Right," agreed Brad, smiling broadly. Already he had a notion as to what had brought Mr. Merrimack to the cub meeting. "You boys did me a big favor," the man continued. "I never expected to see the color of my money again. But thanks to your fine organization, I got nearly every penny back." Jack Phillips had a hand in it too, Dan reminded him. I'm fully aware of that," Mr. Merrimack nodded. "Fact is, I've talked to the court officials about the lad. I mean to help him if I can." Has a good home with Mrs. Jones," Brad said hastily. "What's more, he likes it there. Oh, I have no intention of taking the boy away from her. That thought never entered my head. I did think that later on the lad may want a special schooling that Mrs. Jones may not be able to provide. That's where I aim to step into the picture." "Why, that's fine," Brad exclaimed, while Dan echoed the sentiment. "To get back to the purpose of my call here tonight," Mr. Merrimack resumed, "you'll remember I promised that if my money were recovered, I'd not forget the church fund." "Yes, but we would never hold you to it," Brad said generously. "Tut, I always intend to give to the building fund, but I was a bit testy about it because of my loss." "Well, I can see you're in a hurry to get started on those victuals, so I'll cut it short. Here's my donation." He handed Dan a check. The boy read the figure, $1,500, and whistled softly. "Wow, this is more than generous, Mr. Merrimack. It's magnificent. Your contribution will put the Cubs over the top," added Brad. "That's all I have to say," Mr. Merrimack declared. "I have to get back home now." "Stay for supper, Mr. Merrimack?" Dan urged. "No, I want to be home," the old man replied. "My nephew is there now, you know. Came this afternoon." The information was new to the boys, but they tried not to show curiosity. "Carl will stay with me for a while," Mr. Merrimack explained. "I was able to get him off on probation. If he leads a straight life, as I think he will, he'll be assured a good home with me." "Your heart's in the right spot, Mr. Merrimack," Dan declared warmly. "Tut," the old man chuckled, embarrassed by the praise. "We'll say goodbye, boys, or should I say, Sir Knights." A delightful social hour followed for the Cubs, their parents and friends. Among those present was Mrs. Jones, who seemed as proud as Jack as if he were her own son. All too soon to please the Cubs, it was time for the meeting to break up. Brad began to put away the swords and other items used during the ceremony. Coming upon the scrapbook which Dan had made, he fingered through it. "You did a bang-up job recording the history of the Cubs," he praised. "But why all the blank pages at the end?" "They represent the future," Dan laughed, stepping out of his armor. "And boy, judging from the past, what a future we'll have. How about it, fellows?" "We'll do our best to make her glow," shouted Chips. The other Cubs, gathering up their belongings, signified agreement, giving a long and lusty woof wail. "Aquila!" They shouted, "We below will do our best." On that note, the Cubs in a burst of enthusiasm, grabbed Dan and tossed him a little way into the air. Then, like a pack of healthy young wolves, they raced out of the meeting hall. The end. Nighty-night, Snooky Ookums. Thanks for listening.